hitting record, and I will do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We're waiting for you to host.
That was the most.
Oh my
That was the
goodness.
most like anticlimactic clap I've ever heard. It's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, I guess I'm so used to not hosting, but I guess
No,
I'll
you're
give it a
the
shot.
host.
I'll give it a shot. All right.
All right.
Hello, and welcome to the Man Down Show. Why is it called the Man Down Show? Because for the second episode in a row, we are minus 2 players. This time, we're absent Sean Elliott again, as before, but this time, Luke Smith is nowhere to be found. But that's all right because we have Robert Ashley
Hello.
and we have Jeff Green.
Hello.
And
I don't know if it's actually all right that they're not here. I think they're wankers for not being here.
Well, Sean, when a new American Girl doll comes out, he gets so excited. He gets really into their backstories, and
Right.
and they were having this new Pocahontas doll come out, and I know he was really up on the web fiction about it, and he started camping out last night to get a couple because he usually puts one or two on eBay.
So he's in line to get the new American Girls doll.
Yeah, exactly. He's a big collector. I mean, you've been to his place, right? It's like a big doll museum. He has all these glass cases full of American Girl dolls. That's crazy.
It's weird. I don't know. Has he ever talked about this in public, or do you
I
think
think
it's
he's honestly a little embarrassed about it.
I don't know
So,
why, because those are pretty cool. Those dolls. I think
Yeah.
it's cool that he has that side of him.
I think that's cool, but I think it's sort of weird that he still has tea parties with them and stuff. I mean, he has like the whole setup with, he's always ready for a fancy English tea with his doll collection.
Right. What's
I think
cool
it's
though is if you've ever seen him give one of these tea parties, like he has this really kind of elaborate fiction going with all the dolls. So you really get the sort of creative side of Sean, and he does different voices for all the dolls when they're having the tea party.
Wow.
I think it's really cool of him. I wish he would share that more in public.
Well, here's the
Yeah.
thing for all the listeners out there. How do they know that this is really us on the show? I mean, this could be Sean doing a tea party with his dolls, disguised as the latest episode of Out of the Game.
It's true, but he's better at the more like little girl falsetto thing though. So that's.
Yeah, and he's always just.
Would you like more tea, Pocahontas? Oh, yes, I would. I take mine with a little sugar. But he's more that kind of guy.
Oh my goodness! And with Luke, I mean, I don't even care to hazard to speculate as to what he's doing. I just hope that whatever it is, I just hope that he got lucky, and if he did, that he used Bobito's music to help him score.
Yeah, he never reported back on that. He never told me. It probably went so disastrously. Probably killed the mood entirely.
I don't know. I really feel like you could be the Marvin Gaye of the next generation. It's
Oh God, I hope not. I would feel really bad if my music was used to make people copulate.
Really?
I don't. Yeah, I just
What would
think
you rather
like
do to your music? What would you prefer?
murder probably.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, just like
sweet.
mass killings. No, I make it sound like it's death metal or something. But it's not.
So where are things though with your where do things stand with your album as of right now?
It's at the printer. So unfortunately, I think we probably would have put it up and put it on sale and put it on the site and everything in 2 weeks or so. But I'm going to France with my wife, and so I'm taking a little break, and we'll have to do it when I get back. So it'll probably be about 3 weeks before it comes out.
Nice.
But,
Where are you going in France?
Well, it's a little up in the air. We're going to a wedding in Paris, and then we're going to get in a car and go somewhere. And we're not exactly sure where. We were thinking about going to the Champagne region because we heard
You
that
should go see
that's
my
pretty fun.
in-laws. Is what you should do.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. I would just show up and be like, "Bonjour, I know Jeff Green." Woo!
But they're probably used to that with Jeff's French fan base.
Oh
Maybe.
their home is kind of like the John and Kate +8, and like the way people are always around their house. That's what it's like at my in-laws' place. You got busloads of French people stopping by this little farm town in the middle. Over in the east coast of France. Où est Jeff? Est-ce que Jeff est là? Yeah.
The announcement.
So your wife is her family is from France originally, or what?
Oh,
Or did
yeah,
they
the
just
whole
move
family.
there after? Oh yeah,
No,
cool.
she's the only one who's actually in the United States.
So is she a war bride or?
My wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff took her by
Was I in the
force.
army? Yeah,
just-
yeah. During World War II, when I was hiding from the Nazis in one of those barns, my wife, she was like one of those milkmaids, and she came out to feed the cows, and there I was hiding in the hay, and the rest is history. That was in about 1942 when I was 30.
So does your wife speak with a French accent? Is she like totally French?
She's completely French. Yes, she's.
I had no idea. That's totally interesting.
Yes, I have a French wife and a very bilingual daughter. So.
Cool.
Yep.
That's fancy. In my house, we spoke redneck.
Yeah, that's like a second language.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of forgot how to speak it though. But well, anyway, yeah, I'm doing the going to France, and so it's gonna sort of affect when that comes out and everything. So
Right, if
Can
I
you
recall
tell
correctly-
us about the record? Have we ever talked about that on this podcast?
I think we talked about it once while you weren't on. We talked about it a little bit,
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
but yeah. Basically, it's a like Japanese pop with like a little bit of a lighter sort of disco beat. It's like a little bit gayer and a little bit more disco, but Japanese pop. So
Gayer than
yeah.
Japanese pop.
yeah. It's actually like the idea is to get so gay that it becomes offensive. So no, I'm just messing with you.
So do you have like Charles Nelson Riley on the cover? And
I don't even know who Charles Nelson Riley is.
okay, see, that's just an old person's joke. Never mind. Let's move on.
Wow.
Go type him in the Wikipedia after we're done.
Here, you guys can hear me type it. Cool.
There
Now
you
people will complain.
Well, I will complain, but the irony is that if I'm not mistaken, at least 2 of 3 of us are on headphone mics now, rather than speaking directly into our machines. So, background guy will not be making an appearance in this episode, despite.
Oh, background guy.
Yeah,
Who is
He was the
background
highlight
guy?
of last week's show. He was amazing.
I was recording from Vancouver, and staying with one of my best friends from childhood. And he forgot that I was recording and took a phone call while we were recording the show, and I was using the built-in mic on my MacBook Pro, and so it picked up some of the conversation before I could mute. And
It was basically like a podcast party line for a moment.
Nice.
It was kind of like performance art. It was neat.
It was pretty cool, but not that he needed to redeem himself at all, because he didn't. He's a pretty cool guy, but he installed Windows 7 Release Candidate 1 on my netbook, my HP netbook, which I then proceeded to rave about on Twitter for the next few hours, because I'm still kind of blown away by how Windows 7 transformed what was effectively had to be a single function device. So I don't know how much you guys know about netbooks or how much our listeners know about netbooks, but there were a couple of Chinese manufacturers that were pioneering, the same guys who pioneered low-cost PCs. We're now doing low-cost laptops. So, 8-point-something inch screens or 10.1 inch screens. So very small form factors, and using Intel's Atom chipset, which was lower power consumption, lower heat. You can still get speeds like 1.6 gigahertz, but they're not really optimized for multitasking the way like a traditional, dual core chip would be, or something like that. And so what's nice about these is they're thin, they're slim, they're light, and the reason they're called netbooks is because the idea is that you're mostly using them for email and surfing the internet. And the first generation of these didn't even have Windows on them; they would just run Linux, some flavor of Linux, and that kind of stuff. And then people started putting Windows XP on them, and then then like HP and Dell, they started selling certain flavors that rather than Linux or proprietary operating system or UI, they had Windows XP on them because Vista was such a resource hog that it didn't really work very well on netbooks. But what I was finding with my HP Mini 1000, which I otherwise liked, I mean it's really good shape, design, I like it, but I could pretty much only run one app at a time. If I try to run more than one, I would have a delay while switching between apps. It would, and even without just sort of that problem, which is a pretty major problem. The other was that the boot up times were slow, power down times were slow. So what it meant was, if I was going to visit a client that I was consulting for, and the whole purpose to have it was to take notes and not have to lug my MacBook Pro around, and have something smaller and lighter. I would have to have it already booted up and in sleep or hibernate mode. And even then, I had one client I went to visit where it was still taking too long to fire up. So I just broke out my MacBook Pro, which I had brought along in a fit of paranoia, and broke it out. So when my friend installed Windows 7 on it, he's an IT manager at a company that does that works with medical companies. So they handle IT for these companies and roll out a lot of the software they use for record keeping and things like that. So he's Microsoft certified. So he downloaded Windows 7 release candidate 1 and installed it on the machine. And there is a point to the story, but it's just like night and day. And the performance now is much more akin to my MacBook Pro or any machine. I can have multiple apps going. It's speedy, it's responsive, it powers up fast, it powers down fast, and I'm still blown away because I knew exactly what this thing could do when it was running XP, and to see it running like this, Windows 7 is a complete game changer for the netbook class. And oh, by the way, I bought a quote-unquote top-of-the-line netbook, and that was still like under $700.
Wow.
Wow, nice. Yeah, I've been wondering about the netbook thing. I mean, the netbooks have been getting so popular, and I've been wondering, what the effect on computer gaming is going to be, because, basically when people go out to buy a computer nowadays, they have these options that are really inexpensive and small and kind of sexy and made to just do the simple things that people really do on their computers for the most part. So that they're, really considering buying these netbooks that have no graphics cards, and I wonder, like, to what degree, PC game sales and playing are driven by the fact that when you go to the store, just the average Joe tends to buy a decent computer that has some kind of graphics capability that will run, some games, and that lets them be able to play games, but at the same time also means that, graphics card makers are pumping out tons and tons of these cards, and I would imagine it makes manufacturing graphics cards significantly cheaper for the real gamer, So quit selling those things, and I wonder what happens.
Well,
So.
I think there are a couple of trends or a couple of things that are happening. One is that NVIDIA has a platform that's aimed at netbooks and low-cost PCs and sort of PCs with very alternative form factors. So the kind of PC you might find in a kitchen or a bathroom or whatever. And the Ion platform consists of Intel's Atom processor, but as well the NVIDIA 9400M or mobile graphics chip. And so the idea with that is you can get respectable performance for games that require 3D acceleration on that. And it's not supposed to be create a huge price increase for the consumer. Maybe, well, I don't know. I mean, somewhere between 25 and $100 maybe, which is significant at that low end, but it's still accessible. And so if netbooks are set to take off even more, they're definitely the fastest growing category for laptops and for PCs. And if NVIDIA gets traction with the Ion platform, if I'm a game developer, if I'm Valve, if I'm Blizzard, if this is the trend that you're going to see, where people are saving lots of money, they're going with the laptop form factor, and this is the rough spec, I think that has to affect how you start thinking about your game designs going forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also just puts more emphasis on the possibility of, play the sort of games being hosted elsewhere. I mean, on a simple level, Flash games, but on a higher level, the kind of cloud gaming services that are far off in the future still, but people are, pretty certain are going to take off eventually. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty it's interesting, but I think we have even more interesting prospects for conversation because while we were in the virtual green room, Jeff, the family man extraordinaire of the show, was regaling us with tales of shared TV watching with his French wife and his bilingual daughter. Jeff?
Jeff is gone.
God, did we lose him? Wow.
He's off watching Buffy right now.
Oh my goodness.
He just could not resist. Where did he go?
I don't know. And he hasn't emailed in or anything like that. Let us.
Wait, can you not hear me?
There we go.
We can hear you now.
I'm here. I've been here.
Okay.
I was just wondering. I was just stunned into silence by the segue you made from netbooks to TV. I don't know how you did that.
Well, as a newbie to the world of podcast hosting, I can't pretend that it was smooth or efficient, but I did my best.
Okay, so it was basically just incompetence that stunned me into silence.
You could certainly say that, and in fact, I think you did.
Okay, so I wonder if all my cogent contributions to the netbook discussion were sort of not recorded.
They definitely weren't, but we should. If you had something cogent to say, let's rewind it back. We can get to.
No, okay. Here's what we could do. We'll edit in the things I said. I'll just say them now, and you put them in at the appropriate places. Okay, here we go.
Right.
Yep. Right. Oh, that's cool. Oh shit. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what we're talking about now? We're talking about TV.
We're talking
Is that how
TV.
it works?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, right. In the virtual green room, we talk about what we're consuming in our media, and among the things I told these guys I was consuming was Buffy with my wife and kid. We're up to season 3 now, and it's one of those shows where now that I'm like so into it, I'm wondering how I possibly missed it the first time around, because it's so damn good, and Joss Whedon is so damn smart as an entertainer in the TV medium, that it's really a joy to go through this the first time around. But I think what fascinated Robert the most was the fact that I'm actually watching TV with my kid. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, how old is your daughter now?
She's 15 now. She's just finishing her freshman year of high school. She's taking her finals this coming week.
And I would guess that by the fact that she is sitting down and watching television with you, that she doesn't hate you.
Right. Not to my face, she doesn't.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, I don't know how I did that. I guess I'm just that goddamn cool. No, I think, I mentioned the theory in the green room, and I think you're going to dispute it, but I speculated that it might be the fact that she's an only child, and so the three of us are, she doesn't have anybody else to hang with at the house, and so she hangs with us. I mean, it's just kind of always been that way at our house. So
yeah.
Maybe we're lucky that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was definitely an only child, but I had the total teenager, like, annoying attitude. So something just happened, snapped in my brain. Where from the age of like 14 or 15 on, I didn't want to hang out with anyone but my friends, and parents were definitely just there to annoy me, or to cause me to like throw a fit and punch a hole in the wall or something. So
well, I don't think there's any question that at times we annoy and embarrass her, and I think there's plenty of cases where she does not really want to hang with us. In fact, I can tell you that the biggest, most real heartbreak I had that I can remember was when Watchmen was coming out, and I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast, but she got all into it before it came out, and she borrowed my original copy that I bought in '86, and she devoured it, and she loved it. So I was getting all psyched to go see it with her, and then when the movie came out, she let me know that she was going with this other person, which is actually a friend of hers, and I was devastated because I thought, hey, no, this is the thing we do together, but in fact, she has her actual own social life that doesn't include her dad.
Yeah, I can see that being a bummer.
Yeah, it was a bummer. When you get used to it, and when your kids, in the like kind of golden, 8 to 12 age, when they're like old enough to hang with and do things with and contribute intelligently to the conversation, and they don't hate you yet. Now, I mean, like you're saying, I mean, I don't think there's a hate thing going, and we watch all the shows that I watch, and we watch as a family. So House and Lost and whatever it is, she's now old enough that she can sit there with the shows that are more adult, quote unquote. And yeah, no, it's never been a problem at our house.
So
I wonder if it isn't also like a reflection of just how it seems like nowadays people with kids manage to avoid the sort of old, I don't know, like age gap traps. It doesn't seem like there's a big difference between what a 15-year-old would be into, barring something super kiddie like Hannah Montana or something,
Right.
versus what an older person might like. The music, there's not really like rebellious young music. In fact, like the young music tends to be just shit. And when people get old enough, they start liking the good music that adults like.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting and weird compared to when I was a kid and there was still very much an age gap and like you don't understand my generation, man.
Right. I think that's super true, and that's probably worth I mean, if there hasn't been a book or study on it already, I think that's probably completely worthy of it because I find that to be remarkably true, just in my own empirical experience here, is that especially in terms of music with she and I, there is no gap whatsoever, and we're talking about like like I'll download the new Grizzly Bear and then tell her you should go check out the Grizzly Bear, and then she'll just get it from me or whatever it happens to be. Like, we're totally on the same wavelength about that stuff, and the only time when it wasn't the case was in that sort of younger, like tween, like 12 to 14, when she was telling me that Fall Out Boy was better than the Beatles, and I wanted to like put a bullet through my head, but that
That sounds dramatic. I don't know if I could deal with that.
It's so traumatic, and but what's great now is that she remembers saying that, and it's like mortified herself that she still apologizes profusely to me, like, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so sorry, Dad.
well, if she was older,
but,
you could both sing "Blame It on the Alcohol."
Yeah, hopefully we can't. Yeah, we can't say that now yet, I don't think.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. But yeah, and now a lot of our conversations are along the lines of like, like, oh God, if I was just, in your generation, I could have seen Velvet Underground live. And I'm like, hold on there, Missy, I'm not that old. But but the fact that she and her friends acknowledge that is cool music now is remarkable to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, truth be told, I get the feeling that you're a little hipper than the average dad of a 15-year-old. I'll give you credit for that.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I have no gauge of that or not. I mean, maybe I'm different, and I talked to some of my friends yesterday who are also 40s like me, and I think that maybe I and these guys are some that never got off the I'm wondering what cool new music there is out this week. And I think maybe some people my generation or my age sort of fall off of that just because of life responsibilities or something. But I never had that transition. I never had that moment where it was like, I'm done. I've now decided that 1985 is the last year that music was good, and fuck all of you kids. I've never had.
I mean, I've already seen that with. I mean, I'm 30, and I've already seen that, with some of my friends. There's a decision that gets made sometime,
Yes.
maybe in your late 20s, where some people decide that they've found their music and that this is what they're going to listen to for the rest of their life, and then some people
Exactly.
continue to keep on like trying to find new stuff.
Right.
So,
I
yeah.
might just be voracious in my listening habits, and it's certainly not. I mean, my listening goes, both up and down the years spectrum. So I'll go back and find stuff from the '60s or whatever that I blew off at the time, and rediscover. But I like listening to new stuff too. The only thing that has definitely changed in a huge way is my live music attendance. So that's something that's almost completely fallen off the map. I used to be a club goer. I used to always want to see every band I liked as soon as they came to town, and that's definitely something that with age I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll just stay home and play it loud at home.
Yeah, I'm already on that page. Although sometimes I feel like it's stupid because I'll go to a show out here and to one of the really nice venues that the Bay Area has, and it's like why don't I ever go to like I went to a show this week at the Fox Theater. I saw the Animal Collective there, and the Fox
I'm
Theater
very
for yeah, the Fox Theater, for people who aren't in the Bay Area, is this really classy Art Deco, amazing sort of ballroom. Like, it's got to be the fanciest place I've ever seen a band in. It's like carpeted floors. They have cocktail waitresses who wade into the crowd and will bring you like any sort of fancy cocktail you want, and it's just the most immaculate kind of amazing place, and it sounds great. And I grew up going to venues in Texas where you go into the bathroom in total repulsion. It's like you really wish that you didn't have to go in there, and if you do, like you just hold your nose and go for it. And it's amazing to go to places that are so classy out here.
I've only heard good things about this theater, so.
Yeah, it's you should really, anything that plays there that you're interested in, just go ahead and check it out, because even if the show ends up not being that great, it's a really fun time to go in there and see it.
So part of being out of the live music loop is the fact that I didn't even know Animal Collective were coming to town, because that's definitely a group that I love now. That there's no way I would have heard of them, obviously, if I wasn't keeping up, because they don't get played on the radio or whatever. They're too odd.
Yeah.
And Guy, are you familiar with that group?
I am not. Elucidate, please.
They're-
Go ahead, Robert.
Oh, I was just gonna say they're this. They've changed over the years, but they're a
Yep.
group from Brooklyn. Now they sort of live all over the world. Like, one of the guys lives in Spain. One of the other guys still lives in Brooklyn. And one of them is works for the UN in some capacity. It's really strange. But their music it started out being really. I mean, imagine their name as being a literal thing. When their music started, it was like they would play this strange psychedelic music that would sort of mimic the natural world, and then they would sing like animals. I mean, they would literally like whoop and howl and make like bird sounds, and it sounds ridiculously cheesy, but it's just sort of exuberant. And they're also just big sort of harmony freaks into like the Beach Boys. And now I'd say they've evolved into a sort of clubbier, heavier band that's more into the electronic side of things. And their new album was recorded by the guy who engineered the two Gnarls Barkley albums. So they have like a real serious low end snap and sort of boom and feel. It even though it's fairly experimental still, I'd say it has almost hit making potential if they would just sort of meander less.
So do you think they'll be able to? Will you think they'll be able to get that hit making potential on their own, or will they sort of end up like, the Dap Kings backing up? What am I spacing on her name? Rehab, Amy Winehouse.
Right.
As opposed to like truly blowing up on their own.
Well,
I can't see them totally blowing up. I mean, I don't know what you think, Jeff, but
I think
I
that
see
they
them
don't.
trying to chase the Radiohead type of audience, maybe.
Yeah, I think that they don't want to necessarily, because if you listen to the latest Animal Collective, and if you listen to the solo record by the guy who lives in Spain now, who goes by the name Panda Bear, he put out his own solo record called Person Pitch earlier last year, which was easily one of the best CDs of the year. When you listen to those and you listen to what they're doing with their melodies and their harmonies, clearly they could be writing number one hits if they just wanted to do that, because they have absolutely beautiful pop. A beautiful pop sensibility, but then they screw it all up on purpose with with distorted sound and weird tape loop stuff and noise. So their goal is obviously something else other than to make pop hits. If they wanted to, you could totally see Animal Collective just saying, "Oh fuck it, let's sell out and let's write a song for Nike," and it would be great. But I don't think that's their game, at least at this point in their career. So.
Well, it's interesting what you guys are saying though about how one's consumption of music changes over time. I mean, during the 90s, I mean, I went to college in 1990. I graduated in 94, and I used to buy lots of CDs. I was in, Tower or Virgin or used CD places like Joe CD like at least twice a week. And I kept up. I read Rolling Stone and Spin and The Source and Vibe, and really kept up with music news and gossip and culture. And then all of a sudden, and I can't remember exactly when, but I suspect it was around 2001. Like 2001, there was a Bjork album that I think that came out that year, and Blueprint 2 came out, the first Blueprint by Jay-Z, and Eminem had put out his second album the year before, not his second real album, but second big album, and that was kind of right around when I stopped caring about pop music culture,
Yeah.
in a big way. And it doesn't mean I don't care about music anymore, but I guess I used to more actively try to discover new music, and now it's all kind of word of mouth. Like someone will send a YouTube link, or I remember I was in LA after an E3, and I ran into Steve Schnur, who runs the music group at EA, and a couple of the people who work with him. And just because they've put me onto stuff before it got hot, or as it was getting hot, and I did the same for stuff I knew about. And I was like, well, what are you guys listening to? And they were like, they're like, Interpol. You should check out. It was like Interpol and Block Party, I think they were talking about at the time. And I went out and got the albums, and I loved them. And I find that there's something about that form of discovery, just the word of mouth recommendation, however it comes, that I like and enjoy. But I guess music or music culture just isn't as central to my life as it was when I was in my late teens and early 20s.
It's funny you mentioned Interpol and Block Party, because I was just talking about this yesterday with my older pals, and I like both those bands too, but I have the sort of grumpy old man immediate gut reaction of yeah, I remember when they were called Joy Division, kind of thing.
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, and there's other stuff I'm still attuned to stuff that I respond to. So for instance, I'd never heard of. Probably, I mean, that might be too strong, but I hadn't heard of Mogwai or heard any of their music. And then I saw the Miami Vice movie with Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx, and two of their songs were in the soundtrack in pretty prominent places in the movie. And I liked the soundtrack. I liked the music that was in there, and that's how I got turned on to Mogwai. That's how I got turned on to Goldfrapp. And so. And then I found friends and just kind of casually mentioned, "Hey, what do you know about this band?" Know about this band? I got all their stuff, and then it was off to the races.
But I think that's pretty much the way that most people listen to music now. I mean, I don't think that people... First of all, there's no media for music that's worth consuming. I mean, practically no. media. No writers that I really want to read. No magazines that I feel compelled to subscribe to. It's just dead, you know. And I think it's mostly because music is so easily transferable nowadays, and so easy to get around word of mouth. You know, you can just sort of send your friend a song, or post a link to a torrent or something, and it just gets around so quickly. And especially, I think people really tend to pick up songs from television and movies now, because that's really the only way that music gets any exposure. And when you talk about like how music isn't as central to your life anymore, I think that's you know, for a lot of people that's true, and I think that it's you know, the way that music has shrunk away from the physical world. You know, there just aren't. You don't go to the record store anymore. People don't go to the store anymore. The actual physical you know, representation of music shrunk from an LP to a CD to nothing, to like a picture on your iPhone. And I just don't think that there's that kind of physical presence that reminds you that's out there anymore, you know?
Very, very true. I was in downtown Berkeley on Telegraph last week to get my haircut at the cheapo place I always go. And it used to be a ritual of mine to just like basically walk up and down Telegraph whenever I went there to get my haircut and do the Cody's Books, which is now gone. Sadly, a Berkeley landmark bookstore, another part of the another victim of modernization. But what I noticed this time was I got my haircut. I went to Moe's Books, the used bookstore, and then I wanted to go home. And right when I had that impulse to go home, I looked across the street and saw Amoeba Records, which for a decade, 2 decades, whatever, was like my mecca of music buying. Just a phenomenal used section, lots of good stuff, lots of indie stuff, lots of reggae and world stuff that you couldn't find anywhere else. And I realized that was completely off my radar now. Yep. I had no interest in going there. Yep. And it blew me away that not only that I didn't want to, but that I had basically forgotten about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I still go to Amoeba. I mean, I don't spend as much money as I used to there, but I will definitely go and blow $50 on a semi-regular basis. But I know that's unusual. Yeah, and I think it's mainly because I'm still into buying vinyl records, because I do like that physical thing. I like to be sort of surrounded by crates of music, which is strangely materialistic, but I just give into it, and so I still go and spend plenty of money there.
Well, vinyl, I don't think there's anything. From what I hear, vinyl is continuing its sort of slow comeback. I mean, clearly it will never be what it once was. But if I'm not recounting this inaccurately, I think Best Buy is adding or increasing the shelf space that it devotes to. Actually, it's not Best Buy, but it was one of the retailers was basically going to be increasing the amount of space that it already provides to vinyl records, simply because that stuff's going to take off. Whereas people's interest in it is increasing. I'm very curious to see. I mean, we already see the impact that Guitar Hero and Rock Band have had on people going to learn to play guitar and learn to play the drums. I'm curious to see if DJ Hero and that other game Scratch will have any impact on people's consumption of vinyl. I know when I took a DJing class a few years back, obviously for the class I had to buy vinyl, and I like the size of the artwork on the covers. I like the way it looks. I always liked that. Obviously there was, fell in love with CDs and digital music, but I like records. I like the sound. I like putting the needle down. And I think, Robert, you made a really interesting point about, what not even just the physical representation, but what the representation period of music has been reduced to. And so now it's kind of like, it's not that people don't get excited. It's not that people don't go to see shows. It's not that people. You could argue that music has become even more pervasive. I mean, you've got hip hop beef has gone from shootouts on Melrose to dueling YouTube videos. 50 Cent and Rick Ross going at each other on YouTube and stuff like that. But at the same time, it feels like more ephemeral than ever. Like it still matters, but it doesn't at the same time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the physical representation, the visual representation of it, maybe even continued fragmentation of audiences. I don't know, but all of that stuff is taking away. Yet at the same time, we're talking about live music. I went to see a show by this R&B group called Raj, Rahj. Not this Saturday that just went by, but the Saturday before, at a club in New York on Third Street, and apparently they've been around for a while. I'd never heard of them. I'd never seen them perform live. They have original music that's pretty solid, but for me, the highlight of their show is effectively these guys they take rock standards, they take R&B standards, and these so covers, but they do them in this kind of almost mashup kind of way. So they took the Daft Punk sample for Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger.
Oh, right, I've heard this.
And a bit of that Kanye kind of vibe, but they put it over 5 to 1 by the Doors. So so the singer is doing 5 to 1 by the Doors, the lyrics from the Doors song, but the band is doing their take on Stronger by both Kanye and Daft Punk, and it was phenomenal. And they did a ton of stuff that was in this vein, and I was just like, I was blown away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do think also that there seem to be a lot of bands nowadays that really thrive as a live show and don't really have to worry about being a great recorded act. Because things have really changed to emphasize live shows. People still go out and see live shows. That's how most bands make money nowadays. And so where for years we had bands that mostly focused on putting out a good album and then tried to come up with some sort of decent show, now it's becoming more the other way around, which is kind of scary if you're really into, say, making recorded music, which is my thing. But cool if you like to see really good live bands.
I think the future belongs to you, though. Because just look at the complaint about hip hop, which sounds very much like, get these kids off my lawn. But the fact is that there are a lot of bands that do not do, or performers in hip hop that do not do good live shows. When you compare to, the Public Enemies, Big Daddy Kane, acts like that. What you get at a hip hop show is the performer, the group, and 30 of their boys on stage, and sound amplification in the venue that's pretty terrible, and they don't sound that great. A lot of them, can't really show off live. But you can have a Soulja Boy who's figuring out how to use social networks to tremendous advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. I don't think it's necessarily a bad time for music. It's just very much a transition.
Yeah.
It really will be interesting to see how much vinyl actually makes a comeback, or is it going to be just this kind of ongoing niche specialty thing, either for collectors or nostalgia folks or DJs? Is the mass public really going to go back to vinyl?
No.
I don't know if the mass public is going to go back, but I could definitely see it being a staple for big, serious music fans. From teenagers on. I really think that vinyl has the aura of something like, the electric guitar or the Marshall Stack. Like, these are things that are tied to our sense of music history, and they're not necessarily. It's not like there aren't other great amps that you could buy that aren't a Marshall Stack, but there will always be the Marshall Stack because it just has this kind of aura of history, and I think that that's what vinyl's all about, is connecting to that great old music at a time when I think a lot of people have an appreciation for how great music used to be. Not that it's not good now, but there was definitely a golden age for 20, 30 years, and all that stuff was on vinyl. So
and I do think there really was. I hope this isn't too old manish, but I don't think there was any. I don't think the CD era or even the MP3 era can compare to that feeling of buying a vinyl record and bringing it home. It was such a thrill to bring those things home in the shrink wrap and to open it up and know that there was going to be cool stuff inside it, or a gigantic lyric sheet, or even a poster. The first record I actually ever bought when I was still a boy, so my mom took me to the store, but I bought Sgt. Pepper on vinyl. And that thing was like loaded with goodies inside. I don't know how much it would cost on eBay to get one of those. I actually still have mine with all the stuff inside, but there were like cutouts of the Beatles and a poster inside and all that stuff. And to have it so big, I mean, it's almost like a real piece of art. Some of these album covers. That one in particular, obviously, but many, many, many more.
Well, and I still remember my parents bought more vinyl than I did because I was born in '72, and by the time I would have been buying my own music, it was you were just starting to transition from from vinyl to CD. But I still remember looking through my parents' collection and finding this Ohio Players album cover, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's pretty famous, but the one with the beautiful naked woman and dressed only in honey. And I was just like,
basically, that was every Ohio Players album cover.
Exactly. And for a 10-year-old boy, that was spectacular in many ways. And it wasn't the same X number of years later when my friend was working at Atlantic Records, and I think it was Sugar Ray put out their CD, and on the cover, they had a nude woman as well. I think it was in a doggy style position or something like that, side shot, so still tasteful. But it was just, at the scale, the Ohio Players album cover, it wasn't just that it was the cover, it was that it was like a threefold cover. So you folded it out, it was more like a Playboy centerfold, and a CD cover just doesn't quite have the same impact. And a Cover Flow album cover has even less impact.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, Jeff was talking about, the new Grizzly Bear album, and I picked that up on vinyl this week, and it came with like a 10-page big book of pictures, basically, like a full color, like nice photos of them hiking around this island, and it was a cool sort of mysterious thing about this band that doesn't really have a lot of it's a really mysterious band, so it's cool to get these photos that you're trying to figure out, like, who are these guys, and there isn't that kind of. I love the way that old albums used to play with mystery in that way, where you didn't have this saturation of personal media, where you get to know everyone on the level of knowing like what television shows they're watching, and you're just like, I have no idea.
Think about how many hours you used to spend staring at Pink Floyd album covers, trying to guess what the hell was going on and what it all meant, I have great memories of that stuff, the Led Zeppelin album covers. And you're right, that's all you knew about the band, because there wasn't Twitter, Jimmy Page wasn't twittering, hey, I just ate some Italian food and now I'm going to go watch House. You didn't know anything about these dudes, except
and you couldn't just look them up and like read the Wikipedia and sort of have pretend pro knowledge of everything. Nowadays you can look up a band and know everything about them in 10 minutes and be able to spout it out at a party like you're the fucking comic book salesman in The Simpsons or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
It's so right. And the flip side of it, though, is how much more accessible it makes this stuff. Is that and you wonder, but making it easier to access, does that take away some of the cultural impact, the underground sense, the sense of sort of illicitness, or sort of, or it just changes, I guess, the nature of the community when you can go to the Nine Inch Nails wiki and find all of recordings of the live recordings of the shows and video recordings of the shows, or you can find a site where you can see Prince at Coachella performing "Creep" by Radiohead and like all these things. I mean, when the ephemera of the artist is made so accessible to beyond the masses, and then it can be just sort of sent zipping around in a status update or a tweet, does that devalue it? Does it spread it? Does it enhance it? Or does it just change it, and we're just waiting to see like how it's all going to come together?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I definitely think that it's changed in the way that, with games, you still have, when I'm excited for a game, there's a day when the game comes out, and I go to the store and I buy it, and you have to wait until you can get it to play it, and you've been sort of looking forward to it for a while, and you still have that sort of anticipation. And I think with music, it's totally changed to this sort of modern. Instead of there being like a big release day, it's all about the long tail already. I mean, when an album comes out that I'm really excited about, the first time I get to hear it is usually like just one day I'm randomly online and I see like, oh look, the new Grizzly Bear album leaked, and I download it. Like I downloaded that album like 3.5 months ago, and it just came out this week. And I mean, I still bought it because I love it, but it's just weird how there's no it's all fizzle. There's no sort of work up to it. It's just there and conveniently available in such a quick way.
Yeah, I remember there was one day, it was like 1980, and I think on the same day, I'm gonna mix this up. It was either Elvis Costello's "Get Happy" and Talking Heads' "Remain in Light," and or Bruce Springsteen's "The River." Two of those three were coming out on the same day. And the night before, I was so excited. I couldn't wait till the record store opened at 10 a.m. to go buy those records. That feeling would just not happen anymore now.
Yeah. I mean, in the 90s, there was... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I disagree with you that with the games, you still do get that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Sort of old school like that. I mean, and also in the 90s and the early 2000s, I remember how big it was to go pick up a CD at midnight. When Radiohead Kid A came out, it was like a party. It was like Star Wars for annoying hipsters.
Well, let's loop it back around though to where we started with Jeff about to talk about watching Buffy with his wife and daughter. And one of the things I was really interested in, I'm not married, I don't have any children, but I definitely have binged on shows that were available on DVD and off the air. So like Miami Vice, I watched 2 seasons worth, or shows while they were still airing, but because I didn't have HBO or I wasn't watching them as they were airing. So shows like Deadwood, The Sopranos, The Wire, things like that. But those were still solo experiences, right? So even some of my friends were in the same position as me, but a lot more had either already watched the episodes as they had aired or would not start watching them until well after I'd watched them on DVD. And what I'm curious about is for me, that was a solo experience. What's it like for you and your family to be collectively binging on episodes of an excellent show that's no longer on air?
Well, it's a fantastic experience. I mean, we'll be. For example, we had an obligation last night, a thing to attend, all of us, and it was fine, but whatever. But there was a certain amount of just obligation boredom in there, and at one point, my daughter and I looked at each other, and we both just went almost simultaneously, Buffy, which was like, let's get the hell out of here and go watch another Buffy. So having that to share with your own family is a super fun and nice experience, and also going through the storyline with other people. I mean, as you know, can just be a rewarding thing when you have people who can intelligently express their own opinions and theories about it. I mean, the only funny thing that we're having that's worth talking about, I guess, is this thing you're talking about that you mentioned earlier, Robert, about this instant expert on everything. It's like there's so much Buffy shit on the internet, it's crazy, and so the three of us have to sort of make this sort of like unspoken vow not to do that, because there's 8 billion spoilers out there, right? And I was on Quarter to Three just the other day, and people were talking about the Buffy reboot movie that got mentioned this week in the press, and the fact that Joss Whedon and none of the cast is going to be involved, which is ridiculous. But then people started talking about the show in general, and I chimed in about how I'm watching it now, and how much I love the character Willow, and how awesome she is, and how she's like the Marianne to Sarah Michelle Gellar's Ginger, and just how cute and adorable she is, and then somebody on the forum went and just did a massive spoiler about what happens to the Willow character that I had no idea about, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? And they rightly said, dude, the statute of limitations is, it's like 10 years ago, so. But that stuff is all out there, and we all know it, and so. And because, so many of these episodes of Buffy end up on cliffhangers, the temptation for any one of the three of us to, secretly sneak over to the laptop and see what's going to happen before the other two do it is right there, So we sort of have this gentleman's agreement not to do that and blow it for each other.
So it's a bit like co-op. You guys are co-op watching, and the agreement is not to run off ahead of
exactly
the group and solo play. What I'm really interested in, though, is the conversational aspect after you've watched an episode. Because again, when I'm binging, and again I was doing this solo. For me, I just roll right into the next episode. The only barrier at the time was I had a day job, so if I had stayed up all night, once it hit 8 a.m., I had to start getting ready to go to work. But so how do you do? I mean, are you talking about the episodes while you're watching them? Do you sort of take a little break in between, or do you just roll right into the next one?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think that. There's this sort of the typical oh my God, don't do that sort of talk that anybody would do when watching at the time, especially if it's a suspense thing like Buffy. But in terms of any analysis or what's happening in the season or predictions or character arcs, that usually tends to wait, and I don't think it's a planned thing. I think it's just the dynamic that we're in, is that we all process, I think. I don't know if every family or every group of people that watches things together that way is like that, but it seems to work that way for us, where we'll watch it and maybe we'll blast right into the next one right away if it's not too late at night. But usually the discussion will happen the next day at dinner or something, where we'll go wow, last that was amazing. I never knew that character would do that. Or wasn't it cool the way Joss Whedon referenced, this old movie in that way or whatever. Or telling our daughter maybe something that she wouldn't have picked up on because she's too young, that kind of thing. So I would say that any real analytic discussion is happening probably a good 24 hours later.
Okay.
And I find that happens with movies too. I don't know about you guys, if you're, when you see them with wives or dates or friends, often when we walk out of the movie theater, we're not yet analyzing. We may go to dinner or whatever and still not talk about the movie, but talk about it a day later and then really get into it.
I hate the pressure to talk about a movie right afterward.
Right.
For me, I used to write movie reviews in college, and I did a little bit of it after college. And so for me, and I studied filmmaking while I was at college. So for me, my analytic brain is running parallel with my experiential, my audience brain. So it's impossible for me to turn it off. And I'm there are snap judgments and assessments I'm making of what I'm seeing a lot of times, particularly with Hollywood movies. Maybe it's a little bit less so with certain types of art house movies or things like that. But usually by the time I get out of the theater, I've formulated some fairly opinionated thoughts about where it is. And it's not so much force myself to do anymore. I've just learned to do over the years is I try not to talk first. Because I have to remind myself that not everyone looks at movies like that. That other people want space to continue to process the movie, right? That it's still sitting with them. Not everyone's interested. A lot of people are interested in sort of coming to a judgment or a snap judgment or a definitive judgment about what it is they saw. So I generally now. I wait to be asked about my opinion, and what I actually try to do is let an appropriate amount of time pass as you're on your way out and you're headed over to the bar or dinner or whatever, and wait for them or sort of ask them what they thought and sort of go into that, because and part of the reason that's interesting is I already know what I think. I'm actually just curious about what other people think about what they saw.
I usually just right when the credits start rolling, I'll just be like, sucked.
Did that come in
Or
handy
maybe
for
during the
Terminator
movie.
Salvation?
What was that?
Did that come in handy for Terminator Salvation?
Oh, I didn't see it because I knew that would suck. Yeah.
Yeah, boy, I hate that so much. I hate when somebody does that. I can't. I think the last movie that happened in was No Country for Old Men. You know, which if you're not ready for it, that ending can be a bit abrupt, or it's definitely one, even if you don't think it's abrupt, where you know it doesn't do what you expect it's going to do. You know, there's no big Hollywood moment. That movie just kind of ends, and I love that ending, but you know, that's a needs processing ending. And as soon as the end went up, you know, some guy in the crowd at Berkeley did basically that. It was just like bullshit, you know, really loud. And it's like, dude, come on, you know. Like it almost.
I like that though. I really think like that's that's part of the reason to go see a movie in a crowd. I like the live reaction of people to movies is totally why I want to go to the movies, even if it pisses me off. Like it can just be really cool, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last movie I did that for in a major way. So anytime it's a big Hollywood movie, I'd rather go see it in Times Square in New York because you get fairly vocal audiences there, and if you're going to see a Hollywood movie, especially a summer movie or a big comedy, like that's what you want. You want that
Sure.
shared experience.
Sure.
But I remember this was sometime in the 90s, mid to late 90s, when Waiting to Exhale came out. And I actually went to see it twice the same day. And the reason I did was because I saw it once so I could hear the dialogue, hear everything, right? So I went like before I went to work because I knew there'd be very few people in the theater. And then I went to a 10 o'clock show so I could see it with an audience where I knew they were going to be talking back to the screen and laughing really loudly, and I wasn't going to be able to hear everything. But I wanted to have that communal experience of an anticipated movie like that with an audience that was feeding for it, and it was great.
Right.
I remember seeing Borat in Berkeley, and that movie, believe it or not, for Berkeley was like the biggest thing in the world. I don't know why. I mean, it was so packed that there was almost like a riot in the in the lobby where one showing was coming into the movie and one showing was leaving, and they were like pressed up against each other. It was insane. But I remember watching that movie and like the crowd laughing so hard that you missed half the jokes. Like I had to see it again because they were just laughing so hard that you missed half of what was going on, which is great, but also just one of those weird things about watching a movie in an audience.
Yeah. There is really kind of nothing like that, and it's I haven't seen Star Trek yet, believe it or not, and now I'm feeling like I've almost missed the opportunity. Well, maybe it's still so popular that the theater will still be packed, but like certain movies, you want to be in a packed theater and not an empty one. Even like seeing it at the theater doesn't count if there's nobody in there. Then you might as well just be at home.
Yeah.
Like the one that I'm most anxious to see, I have to admit, in the theater right now is Drag Me to Hell, the new Sam Raimi movie.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to see it at the theater is obvious, right? Because it's a horror movie and everybody's going to be screaming and laughing. So
Yeah, horror movies you definitely want to see with an audience, and I can think of some that I've really liked that I'm mad that I didn't see them with an audience. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie High Tension
No.
or even heard of it. It's a French horror film by the guy who directed the remake of The Hills Have Eyes.
right, okay,
Not the sequel.
which was pretty good. That
Exactly.
remake.
Yep. He did a
Yeah.
pretty good job with that, and then he did Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland, which I didn't go to see. It looked pretty bad in the trailers, but this movie, and apparently there's a pretty strong case that he pretty much jacked the plot and a lot of the scares from a Dean Koontz novel for High Tension. But regardless of it, I mean, it's extremely nerve-wracking watching this film. And and I was watching it at a friend's, sitting on a friend's couch and just being like, "Oh my God!" And I can only imagine how much more tension-inducing it would have been with an audience. And that's a great thing about when you're being with an audience, is that the way that it can amplify or reinforce responses that you're already having to the movie.
Sure. Right. I remember seeing the first Halloween when it came out at a theater in Berkeley, and these girls were behind us, and they were screaming so loud, like it would have been annoying to me, except they were actually scaring the shit out of me. Their screaming was making the movie that much more scary because they were so scared. You know, it's like, stop! You're scaring me.
Wow. Yeah. No. I mean, it's. I mean, this thing that, going back to the whole TV, the point of the TV discussion. I mean, something I've said before about the moment that we were in sort of the mid double O's. I felt that TV as a medium really came into its own. I felt like it was a golden age, and what I point to for myself is the holy trinity of the three Davids: David Chase with The Sopranos, David Simon with The Wire, and David Milch with Deadwood. And what helped me sort of understand a potential reason for why that came about was actually a conversation I had with Joe Quesada, and then I forget the name of the guy who's on the business side, but of Marvel Comics. So I was doing a story for Newsweek on the resurgence of Marvel, and I think it was pegged to the release of Daredevil, which actually turned out to be a little bit of a low point theatrically for Marvel.
Yeah.
But they were talking about the resurgence of the company, and one of the things they were talking about was the comic book part of it itself. So what they now say is about the comic book side of the biz is it's like R&D for movies, right? Because our artists have an unlimited budget in their imagination, and they can put out these crazy visions, and we get to test them out and all that kind of stuff. But what they were talking about is after the speculators got in the late 80s and early 90s, and the Todd McFarlane era, and you had like 10 million versions of each cover, and everyone was buying to collect and as an investment, and then the bottom fell out of that. And they credited DC with sort of really pioneering the sales of collected volumes at bookstores. And so they realized that, look, this is actually a pretty good business that can be done here, but the problem is that the storytelling wasn't suited for it. And so the larger point to preface, and I'll get back to it, is the idea of how distribution changes content. So what was happening was when the end point was the drugstore or the supermarket, wherever comics were sold, the comic book would have a splash page at the start to hook you, cover art and cover language that was going to make you, oh my God, I got to read it, and then a cliffhanger at the end. And so the stories were these never-ending stories. They were like soap operas or telenovelas. They began maybe with issue 1. They kind of didn't really end until the run of the comic book was over. And what they found when they went to collect these volumes was, well, there often wasn't a natural endpoint.
It's like arcade games, It's the same story, that when games are made to eat your quarters and they ported them home, a lot of people were like, "Geez, I hate this game." And they were completely unfriendly.
And the sad thing is that there's still some designers who design games with a little bit of an arcade mentality when it comes to difficulty and certain other things. So when they decided to go for the bookstores, then they changed how they structured the story. So now you would have stories that were 2-episode arcs or 2-issue arcs, 4 issues, 6 issues. They generally don't go longer than 12. And the reason was to make them, easier to collect. Now on TV, the endpoint for television before DVDs, because TVs on VHS, like collecting runs of TV on VHS, never took off. It wasn't until DVD that started to take off. But before that, the endpoint was syndication. The goal was to have 100 episodes. Right. And there were a couple of things on the syndication. And one, the episodes were going to be aired like 5 days a week. You couldn't count on the syndicator airing the episodes in the order in which they were originally aired. So you had to be able to view the series, the episodes out of order. And and the reason the syndicators wouldn't do that is because you might have someone watching the episode who's home 2 nights a week and then works a night shift for three. You don't want to lose that viewer on the days they're home, and so that was the whole thing. Hit 100 episodes, and be able to watch it out of order. So what did this mean? Well, a couple of things. One of the things it meant was, well, you're trying to get to 100 episodes as quickly as possible, so you're doing upwards of 20 episodes in a season. That's one thing. The other is, well, you're not going to do episodic storytelling. You're going to do self-contained episodes that can be watched in any order. And
Right.
the peak of this, and it was deliberately done, Dick Wolf will admit it, is Law and Order. Each episode is metronomic in terms of the way it's constructed. You've got the cops on one side, the lawyers on the other, the sound that brings you back, and like all of that stuff. Very little in the main Law and Order show about the characters' home lives. That's not the focus. The actors ultimately become interchangeable. And the goal was to hit 100 episodes as quickly as possible and be perfect for syndication. But HBO's model was completely different. For the HBO, the whole thing for HBO was they just had to find one thing that was going to make you subscribe because it was pay cable.
Right.
And because it was pay cable, they didn't have the same restrictions on language, nudity, and all these things. So if you were going to subscribe, if the one thing you had to get HBO for was Sex and the City, well, that was great. That was all they had to do was get you to watch that show. Because they weren't going for syndication, they didn't have to. They could do episodic story. I mean, they could do episodic storytelling. So you could have Sex and the City didn't quite do it as much. I mean, that was a little more individual. But you look at The Wire, Deadwood, Sopranos. It's built along. It's more like novelistic the way they tell the stories.
Right.
And they didn't have to do 24 episodes or 26 episodes in a season. They could do an 8-episode run for a season or a 12-episode run, which made it much more like European television. And so when you look at it now and you compare the quality of those shows, it almost looks crazy to do 26 episodes in a season because you're like, there's no way you can maintain the writing quality.
Right.
And also, I just feel like the audience changed. I mean, do you guys remember when? I can't remember the exact moment when people started using the word season to talk about television, but it really wasn't. People weren't so involved in television as to say, "Oh, there's a new season of this show that I love." Like that was kind of an expert kind of thing. Most people just sort of tuned into TV and watched whatever was going to come on, and either reruns were on or there were new shows. But I really feel like people didn't think about seasons of shows in the way that they do now, and the way that they follow shows like season by season, DVD by DVD, and really get to know them on that level.
Well, that's the final thing is that DVD really brings it home because for HBO that was now their other endpoint. So they're making enough money airing the shows the first time around to keep them on the air, but then in DVD they could get to audiences that weren't willing to pay for HBO or cable like myself, but people were willing to collect the episodes and watch them. So that sort of happened. Their golden age of creation came as, collecting seasons of DVDs of TV shows became popular. But then it created a natural entry point for people who hadn't gotten on board the show because before the age of on-demand television and DVD, you kind of couldn't get on board for those shows, which wouldn't be so bad for Friends. Like if you didn't start watching Friends until season 3, you were fine. You could jump in. You could jump in anywhere. If you didn't start watching The Wire until season 3, you're fucking lost.
Yeah, there's no way.
And DVD made it possible for people to catch up and then get back on. And because they had the shows that could build of enough quality that could build that word of mouth, that was happening. So I definitely know people who started watching in season 2 or season 3 and then started watching the episodes live. And
right.
so,
I find that happens a lot with me, where it usually takes till the second or third season before I realize I've missed out on something, and then I'm immediately scouring whatever it is, either Netflix or Hulu or whatever, to see if and Mad Men was an example of that, where I missed out on season 1. I'd sort of half paid attention to the hype, but wasn't really at that moment in time interested in adding a new show to the schedule. But then once the season 2 was about to come around and the hype was back in fever pitch again, I was easily able to catch up by having the stuff on DVD. I mean, it was just a great way to catch up fast, and something that did not exist, even a few years ago.
Yeah, it makes me wonder like how, I mean, you're already seeing how digital distribution is or just distribution period, changes in distribution change games, right? So, the Geometry Wars and Braids and Pixel Junk Edens and games like that of the world, before you would have had to you'd have had to find a way to big those games up. I know that's not really a word, and it's incorrect use of it actually, but you have to embiggen or expand these games.
Engorge.
Exactly, in order to justify a $50 or $60 price point. And now
and the games really reflected that. I mean, how many games have you played that you were like, wow, that was a great 5-hour game that went on about 20 hours too long?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, that's probably a pretty decent endpoint.
It is. It is. The question is it a decent endpoint for the show itself? We are at the hour and 14-minute mark. Unless we really want to do what you've been consuming. Do we want to sort of get into PopCap and those other things, or do we feel like we're sort of
we can maybe save that, and that way I don't have to embarrass myself with talking about Pokemon. So
we're gonna get you on that though, man. You're gonna tell us your favorite Pokemon. Because I know you have a pet Pokemon, but we'll save it.
We'll save it. I'll let people guess. People can guess what my favorite is.
Absolutely. Plus, we don't want to rock through all the good stuff before our absent-minded partners make their way back to the show.
Right, and we've talked around it or talked about them a little bit in this episode, but I do want to advise anyone listening to pick up the new Grizzly Bear because it is an amazing CD. I don't know, do you love it as much as I do, Robert?
Oh yeah, I mean it's my favorite album of the past couple years.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right,
for sure. Veckatimest. It's Veckatimest. I think.
I think that's
so. There you go.
Yeah,
so just look that shit
very
up.
Very good, kind of like chamber pop, very beautiful harmonies. I don't know how else you describe it, but also kind of on the experimental side a little bit.
Excellent. Well, a little musical recommendation on the way out, and I guess that is a perfect place to bring the show to a close. This has been another episode of the Man Down Show, aka the Jeff Green Show, starring Jeff Green, aka Out of the Game. And even though we didn't have background guy here, we hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to sharing more of our thoughts and opinions with you. Thank you, and good night.